Well, welcome to Bloom. My guest today is Todd Smith. He's a facilitator of Byron Katie's work, and he works exclusively with sensitive people and does a lot of stress management for highly sensitive people. So, welcome to this show, Todd. You live in British Columbia, if I'm correct,
That is
and
correct.
I'm going to hand over, to you to explain a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Yola. It's really nice to be here, and it's great to be talking about highly sensitive people. And I always feel like I discovered that I was a highly sensitive person later in life, not only in a few years ago, but just finding that out and understanding that has made a huge change in the way that I experience myself and see how I fit in. And so I've always been interested in spiritual development. I've always been interested in meditation, inner work, and diving deeply into these areas. So now I bring that to the people that seem to resonate with it most, which is also who I also relate to most easily, which are highly sensitive people.
Hmm. And when we prepared for this podcast, we decided to talk about integration because that seems to be a thread in your life. And I know it's relevant for many sensitive people, integrating the inner and outer world. And then you just said something just before we went, we turned the recording on. You talked about the depth inside and outside that highly sensitive people have that is so often so difficult to bridge and to connect and to communicate. And you know, so let's dive into that a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about the many things you've done in your life and what needed to be integrated? I mean, start, in your childhood or anywhere else you would like.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a average household. My parents were both doctors, so there was not any huge strain in terms of finances. But my mother was more of an outward going person, more extrovert, I would say. My father was more introvert and really, I believe, HSP as well.
Mhm.
And it was like two opposites that I was living with, like I couldn't figure out where I was. And as an HSP, I tended to be uh, just, well, maybe as an introvert as well, more inwardly focused. And so there was always this feeling like, how do I bridge this impossible gap between
Mm.
mom and dad? And they were very opposite. And as I've grown from there, I've seen that is not just mom and dad. Like these are major themes of inward and outward and spiritual and material and myself and the world and these huge opposites that I in a sense sit in the middle of seems to be my mission, my life's calling to try to bridge. And I'm sure it started with mom and dad, of course, but it certainly feels like something important that has been guiding intuitively my life for a long time.
And now you're bridging, the inner and outer world for other HSPs that have not taken a part of the path that you've taken in integrating this. So whatever we learn, we can then hand on to other people and be an example and show people the way. We can be a way shower for that. And I think sometimes we get that, many difficulties in one arena in order to be a way shower for others later on in life. And that's what I
Yes.
heard very strongly when I listened to your story. Would you like to go a little bit deeper? I really like this idea of the depth inside and outside. Can you go into that a little bit more, what that means to you?
Yeah. It's just been an area of fascination for me, the inside, the inner part of me. Um, I learned to meditate when I was 6, and my dad learned at the same time. And then I used to sit and meditate with him every day before morning and evening, and we just kind of continued. I've been meditating now for almost 50 years, and it's something that is a super part of my life because it opens something deeper, like access to some deeper part of myself. And so I think as highly sensitive people, we are interested in depth. We have the capacity and the willingness to seek it out. It's often easy to overlook because life is busy and there's lots of fires to put out, but there's a quietness and something solid and important in the depths of our awareness, and that has always called me. So that I think is on a personal level interesting to me, but I think it's not uncommon for people who are highly sensitive. In fact, the interest in spirituality, I think, is a common thread
Mhm.
among
Mhm.
sensitive people. The other side is the, like I say, the outer world sometimes is a little more scary for me because that is, I'm not as comfortable in it. But at the same time, and I think this is again a thread for highly sensitive people, is that we are tuned in to the world around us
Mm.
almost more than other people. So we're in a unique position where we kind of have our roots in something deep inside, and we also have our reach into something outside, and we're aware of other people. We're aware of what they're feeling, what they're seeing. We're noticing the subtleties in our environment. And to ignore that is not fully it. And so, for me, I lived in an ashram for about 10 years in my 20s. And I tried to go just on the inward side and just only be inward. And it was lovely. It was really good. I really enjoyed that. There was a lot of depth and happiness in that. But there was something in me that wouldn't let me just be there. And I think it could be just personal to me, could be something part of being an HSP, but I'm aware of the outside world. I'm aware of the people and things moving around in it. And for me to try to ignore that didn't feel like the whole story. So I think that's what I mean by there's a ability to go deeply both out in the outward direction and in the inward direction. And so as a
Mm.
result, there's a need for an integration, maybe a bigger integration because of that.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. One, because it mirrors something in my life too. I remember in college talking to an Indian meditation teacher that came, and we discussed in a group, meditation. And I said, well, it's all nice and fine to go and meditate in a place where you're never disturbed. But the challenge for me is to stay in a calm state in real life. And I think,
Yes.
and he really agreed with me, which made me very happy, because I thought it was something wrong with me that I kept saying, well, if I just sit in a cave and nobody bothers me, then I'm the ruler of my life. So that's, nothing against that. But and I think that is a point that two things here I would like to discuss with you. One is that many people see meditation mainly as stress management. And since you also work with that, we could talk about these two facets of meditation. One is the self-exploration, and the other one is maybe the stress management or whatever else you would like to add. And then the other thing is that um, sensitive people tend to shy away from the external depth. And I don't think it's just because a lot of us are introvert. I think there is something else. So could we explore that a bit deeper?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I know in my experience, I have shied away from the outer depth, and I've tended to see things clearly, experience what I see about the world around me, but I stop there. I don't always take action, and it has been a problem in my life, actually.
Mhm.
Like in terms of I think a great area to look at is with the area of money. And, you talk a lot about leadership and kind of taking that role. It requires charging money for what you do, it requires actually asking for what you want, putting yourself out there. learning like skills of how to communicate and how to ask for what you want. Like these are not skills that I sought out. These were skills I avoided.
Neither did I.
So I feel like, strangely enough, that I'm on the cutting edge of my spiritual development in a strange way when I'm studying business, like my
Hmm.
God forbid, right?
Hmm.
That I'm actually learning how to be practical and and learn things like marketing or learn things like sales or things that I would really have a prejudice against, I think, in a way. So for me, it's integrating these opposites and can I find myself there? Can I find home there also? Can I find spirituality even there?
Hmm.
And that's, I think, the challenge for many of us. And I think it could
Hmm.
be a common for HSPs, not just whether you're introvert either. Like there's something, there's something about the comfort level of being in my own little small place. And I agree. When it comes to meditation, I always say it's easy to be enlightened in a cave. Just close your eyes and the world is small and everything's good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I wanted or needed or had to uh, find a way to be comfortable in the wide world as well. And that's my path. I'm still
Hmm.
uh, growing in that way. But it feels like balance. It feels like I love the word integration because it's not just inner, it's inner and outer together.
Yeah. And integration implies some sort of work, I find. Yeah,
Yeah.
because then you need to reshuffle or rearrange or reconsider, reframe in order to make a whole of two separate things, right? Um, and in my experience, sensitives shy away from that for some reason. I haven't quite understood why. Do you have any ideas?
It's just as you're saying that, I think um, it takes courage to do it. And I think as sensitives, we are obviously sensitive to repercussions, and
Hmm.
people will not always like it. You will get pushback. I've had people say, "Oh, you're insane," like they've actually thought I've gone crazy now that
Hmm.
I'm just, like I've kind of shifted my business from being focused on just doing the work to doing focused on HSPs, and people thought, "Oh,
Hmm.
you've lost your mind." So that kind of thing, that's scary for
Yes.
an
Yeah.
HSP. We don't like that. And I think also there's a there's a kind of internalized shame maybe of being highly sensitive that we're different. We're in a minority. 15 to 20% of the world is HSP, which seems like a lot, but still it's a minority and it's not recognized. And we can end up just hesitating to express ourselves. But I think it's because we're so empathetic, we're so tuned into everyone, and we're averse to conflict, and we don't like discomfort. And so, why would we put ourselves out into a scary situation if we can avoid it? I think that's how I see the resistance
It's
to that
interesting.
kind of integration.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's often also the resistance to leadership. We talked about leadership because Um, but let's just for a moment return so that I can finish that thought also in my head, about the meditation and stress management, because I think it fits in nicely with um, how do I deal with that anxiety around being seen, being visible in my decisions, being visible in my leadership. Um, Can you sort of talk a little bit more about your work around with stress management and the role meditation might or might not take in your approach?
Yeah, for me, meditation is a key factor in stress management. It's more than just stress management, but stress management is the first thing that it addresses. I think, yeah, there are two ways to think of meditation, and there are many kinds of meditation as well. So
Hmm.
meditation can be thought of as just relaxation, and and that's great. It's relaxing. It's good to relax. It's quieting the mind a bit. It's just giving some balance to the outward movement of the mind. And this is therapeutic in a way, and that it just balances. Rest is the antidote to activity or overactivity. But there's also different kinds of meditation or different experiences within each kind of meditation, which is that it can go deeper and it can become something that is like it opens something inside that is like getting more and more in touch with a deeper level of myself. And that is more spiritual, like the spiritual side of it. So it like the nice thing about meditation is the same tool can start out as just removing the stresses and gross fatigue and things out of the nervous system. But then as it continues, it can get subtler and subtler and allow you to be more in touch with who you are. Now, the theme we're talking about is integration. And if I'm able to be in touch with myself more strongly, like more closely, that's when I start to find more courage to step
Hmm.
beyond my comfort zone. Um,
Hmm.
it's it's like the roots of the tree have to go deeper so that the branches can go taller. And so that's where I see the role of meditation as allowing me to access that because it requires stillness. You know, they're fine feelings. What do I want? It's a very subtle feeling. What feels right to me? What is my heart's desire? And that is not something that, uh, or it's something that's easy to miss. So if you're meditating regularly, if not only are you removing the stress from your physical body and mind, but you're becoming more and more in touch with who you are and what your interests are, and and that's really important. I my my background in life has been to um, not be sure what I even want, not even be sure what my preferences are or anything
Hmm.
like that. But when you quiet, you start to find what those are, and then the courage starts to come to be able to act on that.
And I think, thank you for that, because I think there are two things here again that are important. One is that that deep intuition that we have depends on a certain amount of stillness and listening to that quiet voice. And it's not something we're taught in our society at all. But in order to develop our power as sensitives, we need to find access to it. And meditation is one way of doing it.
Yeah,
My way of doing it was martial arts. But that, if you have a good teacher, is a form of meditation.
correct. Yes, yes. There are many forms of meditation. In a
Yes.
way, anything can be meditation if it's held that way. But yes, there are many forms.
Yeah. And movement is one of them.
Yes.
And because, and why I say that also is because I carried so much trauma that sitting still was almost impossible. Every time I would sit still, I would get my heart start to race. And I would sit there, and after 5 minutes, I would say, right, that's it.
Yes.
And there was
Yes.
nothing I could do about it until I dealt with the trauma underneath.
Yes.
So, what's your take on that or your advice on that for people that struggle with too much anxiety to actually sit still because their body just goes wild?
Yes. No, I get that, and it's you're absolutely right. There are traumas or blocks or things that get in the way of even being able to sit and meditate. Also, just having our physical needs met can get in the way. If
Mm.
those aren't met, how am I going to sit and meditate? I'm too hungry, or I'm too just exhausted, or something like that. So we have to take care of the seemingly superficial or surface level areas of stress in addition to opening up the possibility for meditation.
Mm,
I love that you mentioned movement because it is a powerful way of quieting the mind without having to sit still. So it's perfect. And the idea that this brings up for me is that there's another component that's as important as meditation for me, and that is inner work.
mhm,
Because inner work for me is different than meditation.
mhm,
Meditation is just quieting the mind, becoming more settled. It's it's a more general practice, whereas inner work is very specific, dealing with the sticking points, for
mhm,
example, traumas or
mhm.
places where I'm not able to let go, places that keep holding me back. So inner work I find is the perfect complement to meditation. And I found that later, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that started to discover, like I found the work of Byron Katie
Mhm.
and that's the form that I use. But when you start actually addressing the issues that are bothering you, and then you put attention there and begin to unravel those, then those things that are holding you back are less of an obstacle. And then meditation can get a little more traction.
Mhm.
And then vice versa. As you continue meditation, you actually are even better at unraveling these little knots through inner work, and they complement each other back and forth.
Yes. And I remember when we talked, in preparation, we found this little visual, if you like, that we said that meditation is to generally turn the light on in in your life, and that the work by Byron Katie is like a flashlight, putting a flashlight on something. So I thought that really put it in a nutshell. And we've talked a lot about meditation, so let's dive a little bit into the work and how you see it, and how it is useful. Because as you remember, I said I had a lot of trouble with the work, so I was really curious about your take
Yeah,
on it, and I found it very interesting.
yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think there's so many different ways of doing inner work, and I don't think like the work of Byron Katie is the only way, but I love this way. It's something about it just really resonates with me. And I find that for highly sensitive people, it seems to be there's something very gentle about it, or there can be. It's a tool. How you use the tool will make all the difference in the world. You could use it in a rough
Mm-hmm.
way or in a very gentle way. But in essence, it's very respectful of the traumatic part inside, the stressed part. And it says, you are in control. You, uh, I want to hear, first of all, what your complaints are,
Mm-hmm.
and just giving space for that without even needing to change it um, feels like a safe container
Mm-hmm.
for exploring. And then when we go through the questioning process, which is like just kind of gently challenging the beliefs, it's always that the stressed part itself is the one that gets to answer the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that is again super respectful and it provides a safety. So when I'm asking, is it true that something, whatever belief you're questioning, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like I want to hear the stuck part of me's answer, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I already know intellectually. I may know intellectually that this may not even be true, but that doesn't count. That's intellectual information. It has to be on
Mm-hmm.
a felt level, and so I'm. I always say it's like there's a there's a stuck part of us and a kind of a wise part. And the stuck part is like a child that can only walk so fast. And if I try to run with that child, it can't keep up. It will just stop or it will give up and it goes nowhere. So the work for me is about slowing down to the level of the slowest part of me, and
Mm-hmm.
listening to that, giving it space and giving it a chance to work it out, like, oh, could there be a different way of seeing this? Is there another way? Um, and and so that's the approach that I tend to use when doing the work.
Could we just
Um,
briefly,
yeah, go
for
ahead.
those, sorry, that I found that fascinating, but for those listeners who do not know what the work is, could you just very briefly talk about that?
For sure, yeah. So the work is a way to, first of all, identify a stressful moment, stressful situation, and it always works with a concrete situation. Then notice what the emotion is. Probably the emotion came first, and then you find the moment, and then find the thoughts that are connected to that moment. And so it's a way of working with emotions by working with the thoughts, and mind and body are connected. So if you work with thoughts, it also can touch the emotion. So once you identify the thought that you want to question, then you go through these 4 questions. Is it true? So it's kind of a challenge. Is it really true? The very thing you think is true. And can you absolutely know it's true, which is just another repetition of that. And then how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought?
Mm-hmm.
You get to see the effect of believing a thought. And then who would you be without the thought? And you get to experience hypothetically what it would be like if that thought wasn't present in your mind in the same exact situation where you were feeling stress. And it's often remarkable to find that the thought was causing the experience of stress more than the situation, or as much as the situation. And so you start to loosen your attachment a little bit to the thought, and then you go to a turnaround, which is an opposite. There may be more than one. And you look at, okay, could the opposite be true of what I was actually thinking there? And it's radical, and it can be challenging, but the the idea is to look for a bigger truth. Maybe the original thought is true, and this turnaround is also true. Or maybe the original thought just isn't true at all. Or maybe the original thought is true, right? But we're going into it with a kind of scientific approach of, let's find out, is there anything I was missing? And so this way of working with situations can open the mind, and more importantly, open the heart or the emotion that was caught on it, and you start seeing it from slightly different points of view. And what happens is it tends to loosen that attachment, and often it can completely unravel. And I've worked with people with, with PTSD and like actual traumas that just fall away, if it's, and it's not, doesn't always happen, but it's a cool tool, and it's one that I use myself on a regular basis as well.
Yes, I have a question for you for in that regard
Yeah.
in a moment, but I'd like to just follow up on one thing, and that, as a trauma therapist, I find that thoughts very often do not connect to emotions. We can have all kinds of thoughts trying to get away from our emotions or disconnect from them. So why do you think, and that was my problem with the work, but it might also have been the facilitator that, I did those sessions with. How would you say, can that connection happen? Do you think it's the way the facilitator asks the questions? Is it the tone of voice? Is it the environment? Or do you think the questions themselves connect to emotion in an easy way? It's very hard to say what I'm, ask what I'm, but I'm sure you
Yeah.
get my point.
I wanted to ask, like, tell me a little bit more about the way you see thoughts, like not being connected to emotions and like can pull you away. I'd love to hear your perspective on
No,
that
sure.
first.
So there are two kinds of thoughts, if you want to. Those that trigger us, which are very obviously connected to emotions, like if you're afraid of going into an elevator and you imagine an elevator and you think, I'm going in there, have thoughts about having to take a trip and, go to the 100th floor or something. It makes you sweat, right? So that's the thought connected to something. But then what also happens is that when you work with a client and they stay on an intellectual plane the whole time, they explain everything away. So they get
Yes.
completely disconnected from their emotional body. And it's a
Yes,
way of staying safe. So how
absolutely.
do you see those four sentences or the process circumventing this intellectual loop?
Now I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that is a very important thing to be aware of, and something that has to be uh, uh, just guided and like supported, because yes, the mind will try to run away from doing inner work, right? We are attached to our beliefs, and even if they're stressful, we're still attached to them. And so, yeah, I tell people, if you just do the work kind of intellectually, you might as well just do Sudoku or something, because it just really doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't touch anything that's actually
Mm,
real, that is controlling your life on a deep level. So, so kind of goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, that we have to gain the respect of the emotional part of ourselves. We
mhm,
have to go down to its level, and it has to feel like that um, it that whatever it finds is okay. That
mhm,
it's not being pressured to get over it or to change or to let go. That we could do the whole session, or who knows how many sessions, and it can just keep holding that thought as long as it wants, like it's free, right? That's what
mhm,
respect feels like to me. Um, the thing about stress as an entry point is that usually this part that is crying doesn't want to stay crying. Like there is a
mhm,
motivation within itself to have a different experience, but it's not, but it's been pushed down, it's been suppressed, it's been told, get, just like, don't bring this up anymore. I don't want to deal with it. We do that to ourselves. The world around us does that. So this is a very vulnerable part of ourselves. And so I guess the point I'm trying to say is that it is in how you hold this that will make the difference. And if you hold it in a very gentle way, in a very respectful way, the heart, the emotion, the trauma part, it's going to feel like, okay, maybe I'll take a look and just take a peek and see,
mhm,
maybe could it be different than what I'm seeing? But
mhm,
if I change my mind, it's okay. Like it's not going to be punished for
mhm.
not having a breakthrough or something like that. So that's I guess I think I'm answering your question. I guess one
Yeah.
other piece of it would be that when I start with emotion and follow that emotion uh, when I'm doing the work or when I'm facilitating the work, I'm sticking with that trauma part, like the trigger part of it, and I'm holding that. And when I'm looking for a thought to question, I'm looking to the thought that's connected directly to that part, and that's the part I'm holding throughout. The kind of intellectualization that, yeah, that doesn't get much time from my point of view.
You don't give it much air to breathe in your
Not too much air, no.
yeah, so thank you very much for that explanation. I have so many more questions, but we're running out of time. So, very briefly, I know that you had deep beliefs that you need to give all your money away. So, let's just give that a spotlight for a brief moment on how you use the process in order to change that belief.
Yeah. Um, I grew up in a household where, as I mentioned, there was money, but I never saw it. And for me, I might as well have been in a kind of state of absence of money, or it's kind of, I didn't get an allowance. We didn't really learn about money. It wasn't really talked about.
Mhm,
And I kind of took away from that, that there's something taboo about money, that it's
mhm,
not even a good thing to think about or maybe even have. I never got any lessons on how to. manage your money or nothing. So when I came out in the real world, I had no training. It was like a zero. And part of me uh, continued to bury myself. Like I was in school, didn't think about money. Then I just said, I'm going to an ashram. I'm not going
Yes,
to
no
worry about
money in an
money.
ashram.
No money there. And so I have a lot of experience of living with no money, and
Hmm.
somehow there's always enough, but there's not a sense of ownership or not. There's a sense of shame around money. That's what it is. There's a sense of shame. When my mom died, she had some life insurance, and I got some money. And my God, I was totally subconscious, but I ended up investing in some scam thing that lost like almost all of that money. And I'm
Right.
like, it's just like pushing it away, right? I don't
Mm.
deserve it. I don't want anything to do with it. And that's why I say this this idea of going back out into the outer world again, this integration with the outer world
Mhm,
is
mhm.
my cutting edge of spiritual development. Strangely enough, just recently I was increasing my prices and I was hitting so much resistance and have a mentor who was saying, just calling me out, like this is completely, perfectionism, like thinking you're
Old,
not good enough. This
yeah,
is
old stuff,
underselling
old
yourself,
stuff.
like all that. Oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, I see it, but I'm like, but, and I always had so many buts. And so, my focus has always been in business. How can I do the best job? How can
Mm.
I make the clients happy? I want that more than the money for some
Yes.
reason.
Mm.
And, um, and so, yes, it's a giving money away or not asking for money in exchange. And what I've been slowly realizing is that business is a two-way relationship and it has to work for both parties in order for it to be a relationship. And if you're just only giving away and not receiving, then there's an imbalance there. And eventually resentment comes there, and then burnout comes, and then you don't want to do the job anymore. So nobody really wins in the
Yes.
end.
Yes,
So,
you can't serve anybody if you deplete yourself and you do not receive. I think that's a huge lesson for all of us.
yes, it really is. And if I just went with my default, then I will just continue avoiding money my whole life and then not
Miserable.
being miserable. Yeah. So this is exactly the thing of like inner and outer again. Like you
Mhm.
can be really peaceful, blissful, quiet, meditating, feeling really wonderful inside, and then still no money and feeling miserable outside. So
Yeah.
why have such a contrast between inner and outer life? Why not
Mhm.
see if there's a more integrated way? So it requires humility in a strange sense to um, come down off of my high horse that I'm
Mhm.
above money or that
Mhm.
I'm on the spiritual interest. My interest is spiritual, so I don't have to bother with material world. Like, no, that's been my growth. Get down, get your hands dirty, learn the trade, and become a person of the world as well.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that's really important. Thanks for taking us there.
You're
You
welcome.
know, you know that the last question I always ask is, what did I not ask you that you think would be really important for our audience to know?
Yes, good question. And we've covered in such detail probably the most important things, so it's
So
hard to
tell us
say.
about your podcast, Todd, if you want to, because I think that is something we have not talked about, and there's plenty of material there, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. I've had a podcast for about 3.5 years, and the first couple of years I was just, kind of just going along, and then I about a year ago started like I actually hired someone to help me
Mhm.
learn how to do that, and it has grown tremendously, like it's really become very popular, and it's been very interesting. This isn't exactly the same thing of like it's scary to get out there and like be
Yeah,
be
exactly.
like in front instead of behind.
Hmm.
So yeah, my podcast for me is just it's a perfect expression of trying to bring what's inside out, trying to bridge that gap. And what I'm finding is beautifully is that the people that listen and resonate come back and they are like the perfect clients. They're like my favorite clients because
Hmm.
they resonated with me already. And so it really is bridging this so that I'm getting to work with my favorite types of people, and and so it's giving a confidence that I don't have to hide. I don't have to stay quiet, that I can venture out a little bit and actually get rewarded for that, which is really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why I wanted you to talk about that because I remember that from our conversation that you said there was a shift when you shifted something inside and you got help. And then, you have this big audience now that, really resonates with you. And I think that is so important to understand. Sometimes you start a project and it doesn't go the way you want it to go, and it just needs a tweak, a shift, some help in order to move whatever blockade there is or whatever I call them unhelpful belief you have, and then boom, things open up.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so,
exactly. And I think that points to something else that is a blocking point for me sometimes is thinking that I have to do it all myself. I have to
mhm.
figure it all out on my own. And it's just so not true. And I actually love teachers, but I tend to forget that I can use them, or realize that it's worth investing in them to do that. Because it's sometimes just that outside perspective, just slightly different point of view that can help you overcome make the small tweaks that make a difference.
Just like you said, is that really true that I cannot?
That's it.
Is that
That's
really
it.
true?
That's it. Like
Yeah.
it's questioning what you assume to be true. We don't think of questioning what we assume to be true because when you're believing something, you believe it's true and you just act on it like it's true. So that's why I love the work. For me, it's a way of questioning, like, is that really true, and challenging myself. And if I can find another way, it's often right in plain sight. I was not even seeing it the
Exactly.
whole time.
Exactly. So let's encourage, our audience as a closing statement. Let's encourage them to ask questions, to challenge their assumptions, and joyfully, not problematically, joyfully
Yeah.
question the assumptions we have about what is possible.
Yeah, it comes down to curiosity. When you're joyfully questioning your assumptions, you're curious about maybe I'm missing something. Is there something
Yeah.
different? It's not like you're wrong, like no, we're always evolving and always learning, and that's fun. If you like learning, it's fun.
Good. We'll leave you with that. And thank you very, very much, Todd, for this conversation.
My pleasure, Yola. It was great to be here.
Mm.